Hey, good afternoon, I am two. I just wanted to finish up the problem that we left off in class. I wanted to go through the steps of graphing a quadratic equation in standard form. So recall that all equations in standard form are of the form y equals a x squared plus b x plus c. So each of these numbers here are going to correspond to a letter. So 2 will correspond to A, my -4 will correspond to the value B, and my -1 is going to correspond to the value of C. So our first step is going to be to find the axis of symmetry. So remember how when we were graphing with a table, we didn't quite know where the center was. Now we can find the center right away. So my first step is going to be to find the axis of symmetry. Right? I'm going to abbreviate it using AOS. So we had an equation in class. That equation was x equals negative b over 2a. So I'm going to take my values that I have here and I'm going to plug them in to their corresponding letter. So b is going to be the number that corresponds to -4. So be really careful with this. There's a negative in the equation, and then I also have the negative that goes with the number. Okay. Typically, teachers or students might say, instead of saying negative b, they'll say the opposite of b. And we're going to see that right now. We're going to see this -4. When I apply the extra negative to it, it now becomes +4. Right? So that's one way you can do it. The opposite of -4 becomes +4. All right, let's plug in the a value. So in the denominator, I have 2 times my a value, which is just 2. And I go ahead and simplify 2 times 2, and I get 4. And I can go ahead and simplify that again, and I can get my answer of 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. When you're writing the final answer to this, you don't want to just leave the answer as 1. Notice how it's x equals 1. So that's how we're going to write our final answer. So we're going to write x equals 1. Okay, this is going to be my AOS, my axis of symmetry. Now we're going to go to the second step, which is going to be, let's find out, I know where the middle's at, right? My axis of symmetry is the middle of this guy. So actually, why don't we just go ahead and graph it off to the side? All right, I can create a quick little graph here on the side. I know that I have an axis of symmetry at 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my axis of symmetry is at x equals 1. So here it is. Okay, so we have that nice and clear on my graph. This is the middle of the parabola. Okay, so I know it is because it is in a dashed line and it is where the axis of symmetry is going to be. So don't confuse that with the y-axis. So we know that, but now we need to figure out where exactly is the parabola. It's somewhere on this line. So to figure out where it is, we're going to go to the second step. And we're going to find the vertex. Now I know the vertex is somewhere on my line of symmetry. So what I'm going to do to figure out what that exact point is, I'm going to take 1 and I'm going to plug it into the equation, just like we wrote down in our notes in class. So y equals 2 parentheses 1 squared plus, minus 4 parentheses 1 minus 1. So I just replaced every x value with the value I'm plugging in, which is x equals 1. And now I can go ahead and simplify this. Exponents always get multiplied first. And 2 times 1 is 2. -4 times 1 is -4. And then minus 1. And I'm going to end up with 2 minus 4 is -2. Minus 1 is equal to -3. So now I've got the y value of -3. So remember that in class, that the vertex is a point. We talked about that in our class. So we know that the vertex is going to be a point. It is made up of the x value, 1, right? The axis of symmetry, and the y value, -3. Okay, so this is going to be a coordinate point. So when I go to my graph here, I know I'm on the axis of symmetry, so I know I go to the right 1, but now I know I go exactly down 1, 2, 3. And this is where my parabola is going to start. We know it's a U shape. My A value is positive, right? My A value is a positive 2, so I know it's going to go up. So now that's going to take us to our next step, which is going to be to find, let's find another point. The easiest point to find is going to be the y-intercept. The way we find the y-intercept, we let the x value equal to 0. So I'm going to take my equation, and I'm going to replace every x value with 0. So then, anything times 0 is going to give me 0. Anything times 0 is going to give me 0. So I end up with just -1. Now remember, this is not a number. The answer is not a number, it's a point. So the y-intercept is the point made up from plugging in 0 and getting out -1. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this point and I'm going to plot it on my graph. So 0 at -1. 1, so down 1. So there it is. This is my y-intercept. The next step after that, so this will be step 3. My next step after that, step 4, is to reflect the y-intercept. So I'm just going to take this point, and remember that there's this idea of symmetry. When I go to the left, it's going to create this U shape. I know that this is going to be reflected on the opposite side. So what I do is I take this point, if from the axis of symmetry, oops, it's kind of hard to see there, from the axis of symmetry, it's going to go to the left 1, right? So symmetry says it's going to go the exact same distance to the right. So I just go 1 to the right. And there's my graph in standard form. Alrighty, guys. So you guys have seen an entire example of how to graph a quadratic in standard form. All right, so get these down in your notes, and then we'll practice some more tomorrow.